In the world of stories, you don't always need a character who's there from the beginning to the end to make a big impact. Take Lobo, for example. DC Comics introduced him a long time back in June of 1983. Even though he's not a constant presence, he's got a knack for stealing the spotlight in just a few short moments and winning over millions of fans with his brief appearances. It's what sets him apart and makes him such a memorable figure in the world of comics. While Lobo might not be a household name for everyone, those in the know can't help but be drawn to him. Originally introduced as a formidable alien villain hailing from the planet Zarnia, Lobo made a living as an interstellar mercenary and top-tier bounty hunter. With strength that rivaled even Superman's, he was a force to be reckoned with. However, fate took a serious turn when he found himself caught up in an unprecedented event. With the courtesy of Clarion, the Witch Boy, the formidable main man Lobo was transformed into a teenage version of himself. Everyone called this version Lil Lobo, and even he started referring to himself as the top fraggin' teen, and then ended up adopting the name Slobo. However, how Slobo came into existence is a story worth hearing, so that's what we'll be talking about today. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Backstory of Slobo. Lil Lobo may have been a pint-sized version of the original, but his personality was just as fierce. Despite losing much of his former strength, he retained the same badass attitude that made the main man infamous. Surprisingly, instead of being a villain or a dark hero, Lil Lobo forged unexpected friendships with the likes of Superboy, Wonder Girl, Impulse, and others, forming the formidable team known as Young Justice under the leadership of Robin. Together, they went on thrilling adventures, and one such adventure unfolded in the comic Young Justice Behind Enemy Lines, released on October 1st, 1998, when the team found themselves navigating the horrifying terrain of the dark planet Apocalypse. While their mission was to save the wounded supervillains at the time, the Young Justice instead found themselves in Apocalypse to get a hold of the Black Reaper, much to Robin's disappointment. Splitting into two teams, one team set out to locate the Black Racer while the other searched for machine parts to repair their shuttle. Meanwhile, Lil Lobo took on the role of mechanic, staying behind to tend to the shuttle. However, as Robin, Empress, and Secret were looking for the parts, they came across a group of parademons who seemed to multiply endlessly. Even though the trio were trying their best, their efforts seemed futile against the endless onslaught. In the very moment of desperation, Lil Lobo made a dramatic entrance, unleashing a ferocious rampage against the parademons. Ignoring the piercing beams that tore through his body, he fought with unmatched fury. Despite being battered and broken, Lil Lobo's fiery spirit continued as he caught sight of the Black Racer, who was his former rival. Though he yearned to challenge him, his fate had already been sealed. He collapsed on the spot, succumbing to the deep injuries against the parademons. However, even in his death, his strength was acknowledged by parademons. Though his life ended on the battlefield, it was far from the final chapter of his story. From the scattered drops of blood, clones began to emerge one by one, a revelation kept hidden until the issue's conclusion. However, these duplicates began to take shape immediately after Lil Lobo's demise. Though identical in appearance, their purpose was clear: to engage in combat against one another until only one remained standing. As the story progressed, the Young Justice found themselves being captured by Granny Goodness and her subordinates. The members were then subjected to mental torment as their worst nightmares were replayed relentlessly. However, the Young Justice finally breaks free from their grasps and escapes from the scene. Yet their efforts go in vain as they find themselves surrounded with no way to run. But just when all hope seems lost, a dramatic entrance shakes the battlefield once more. This time, it's not just Lil Lobo, but hundreds of them. Launching into action against Darkseid's female elite team, the Lil Lobos provide the distraction the Young Justice need to make their escape from the clutches of Apocalypse at last. Meanwhile, amidst the Lil Lobos' battle royale, only one emerges victorious, a survivor later introduced in issue 38 of Young Justice. However, contrary to expectations, this last survivor proved to be quite different from Lobo. Unlike the original Lobo, who thrived on combat, this newcomer survived not by fighting, but by fleeing the brutal conflict amongst the clones. Born from the weaker end of the gene pool, he was actually the weakest of them all. However, he was the one who finally survived. Now, understanding his fear of war, he rejects the name Lobo, feeling unworthy of its legacy. However, the story of how he finally adopts the name Slobo takes an unexpected turn. In his new persona, nameless and fueled by rage, he goes on a rampage with his supercycle. Meanwhile, Secret reveals to the young Justice that the supercycle, possessing a mind of its own, had stopped obeying commands ever since Robin's departure following a disagreement with the team members. So, Lobo took it as a challenge. However, Lobo hears that as Slobo took it as a challenge, and he instantly likes the name. And this is the moment when he decides that Slobo is going to be his new name. Fate of Slobo. Slobo may have been considerably weaker compared to other versions of Lobo, but he still possessed a considerable amount of badassery. However, being born from the weakest end of the gene pool came with its drawbacks. In later comic issues, we witness Secret, who previously had a calm demeanor, falling under the manipulative influence of Darkseid, transforming into a monster. As Secret undergoes a transformation into a chaotic monster, Darkseid makes an appearance, casting a shadow of fear over the other members who know all too well of his immense power. However, while the rest of the group remains still, Slobo, true to his reckless nature, acts on impulse. Without a second thought, he charges straight at Darkseid, aiming to punch his face. In response, Darkseid effortlessly throws Slobo aside as a warning. As the leader of the Young Justice in Robin's absence, Wonder Girl doesn't hesitate to hold Slobo accountable for the unfortunate turn of events. Although Slobo shows that he doesn't care and leaves the place, deep in his heart, he is no longer the same old Lobo without empathy. Instead, he starts to feel everything. At this very point, we see the matured side of Slobo, who had turned into such an understanding character. He even helps Empress, who was struggling to understand family values. This side of Slobo was beautiful to watch. However, with this maturity in him, there was something else that was taking a toll on him. Behind the funny facade of his actions, Slobo was actually going blind and weaker. It took time, but he finally explained to the other members about his condition and how he had been losing his eyesight since the day he was born. It was a tragic moment. However, Slobo knew all along that he was not going to live forever, and by the time he was blind, he had already accepted his fate. During the final fight, Slobo was at his weakest and completely blind. But that didn't make him run away, but instead, he joined the group even though they didn't want him there. It wasn't the fight that stole the show, but actually the final moments of the comics that did. When Secret goes into full berserk mode, Robin comes in and tries to talk with her. Secret finally understands and breaks Darkseid's manipulation. However, Darkseid feels disgusted with Secret and uses his Omega effect on her. But at that very moment, the blind and weak Slobo, without thinking about anything else, jumps in once again in front of Darkseid. But tragically, Darkseid ends his life in a second with his Omega beams. In a surprising turn of events, Secret survives the Omega effect. Darkseid then reveals that his power had been manipulated. As a consequence, Secret is stripped of her abilities and returns to being immortal instead of vanishing forever. In the final moments, Secret feels sorry for Slobo. However, Wonder Girl tells her that maybe Slobo manipulated Darkseid's Omega effect and saved her after all. And as the one who had already accepted his fate, Slobo might have just designed his own ending. As a result, he might have just achieved his final goal, to die a hero and make his death a meaningful one. Other media appearances of Slobo. Aside from the comics, there's a possibility that Slobo might make an appearance in the HBO Max streaming series Young Justice, but only if the series continues. In Season 3, Episode 26 of the series, we see Lobo engaging in a fierce battle against the Young Justice team and losing a finger in the process. At the very end, the finger starts to take the shape of a human and finally turns into a Lobo clone. This likely showcased Lobo's regeneration power. Even though Lobo crushes the clone with his shoe and lights it up with a cigarette, the scene serves as a teaser for what might be coming next. While the blood is burned down, the clones may not yet resurrect, but there's still a chance that we'll finally see Slobo in action in the future. However, the bad news is that there were no appearances of Lobo or any of his clones in Season 4, named Young Justice Phantoms. Moreover, there is no update on if there will be any more seasons of this series. So, fingers crossed. Power and abilities of Slobo. While Slobo may be pale in comparison to the original Lobo in terms of strength, he's far from being useless. Though he's undoubtedly the weakest version of Lobo, his battle skills are commendable. Furthermore, his resilience is worth noting, as he continues to hold his own despite his limitations. Slobo inherits several powers from his Zarnian physiology, granting him superhuman strength, endurance, and stamina that surpass those of many other superheroes. Additionally, like Lobo, Slobo also possesses regeneration abilities, although they are not as potent as Lobo's were. Despite being blind and weakened from birth, Slobo compensates with heightened senses that make up for his limitations. This became evident when Slobo encountered Empress and told her to observe their surroundings. While Empress initially failed to notice, Slobo, on the other hand, listened attentively and felt the presence of people conversing in the park. In addition to his extraordinary abilities, Slobo possesses exceptional mechanical skills. He's a master pilot and driver with the ability to operate any spacecraft with ease. Furthermore, Slobo is multilingual, which proves invaluable when the team encounters diverse intergalactic species. So, the weakest version may he be, Slobo is undoubtedly a formidable presence not to be underestimated. Marvelous verdict. It is true that Slobo's story was not as majestic as Lobo. However, Slobo, without a doubt, is the most unique version of Lobo. He might have had the same instincts as Lobo, but his new perspective towards life made him a wonderful character from the DC Universe. He has appeared in only 3 comic issues. However, in that short time, his momentary appearances made the story so much more fun to read. Slobo's story was entertaining and emotional at the same time, and that's something rare to see. His moments were always appreciated with laughter. However, his ending was so tragic that nobody got the chance to even lament. It was like he was already dead before he was ultimately killed. However, the way he finally chose to die showed everyone what a perfect character he was. So, if Lobo is a great inclusion in the DC New Earth universe, Slobo is the perfect conclusion to it.